Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. One of the most interesting tech companies in our region is actually based across the Tasman in New Zealand. Datacom is taking on some of the biggest players in the world when it comes to designing, building and operating IT systems for companies and major government departments. It's quite diverse, delivering tech services across a very broad range of sectors. The privately held Datacom recently announced revenue of nearly $1.5 billion for the year, yet most of us know very little about it. Greg Davidson is the CEO of Datacom. Greg, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks for inviting me, Sean.
So Datacom's big. 6,800 people across 26 locations. We are a bit parochial here in Australia, I've got to say. So perhaps the fact that Datacom is headquartered at least in New Zealand means we don't pay enough attention. But tell me about the core business, because you have some massive contracts with Australian government departments.
Yeah, sure. And look, you're quite right in saying we're diverse. If I was going to try and sort of sit down and exhaustively run you through all the different things we're involved in, it wouldn't be a good answer to your question. Perhaps the best way to get a sense of us is we do everything from helping New South Wales commuters make sure that they've got access to up-to-date public transport information. We've been putting new tools in front of Australian councils to help them provide easy self-service options to their customers. We worked with the Australian Red Cross Blood Service to help them build organ match to ensure there's a better chance of donors finding a transplant match. I could keep on going with examples like that. We've worked extensively with a number of different organisations from ADHA to Federal Health right the way through the pandemic to help them with their response and their technology issues throughout that. So it is really broad spectrum. And I don't like to think of us as headquartered in New Zealand. I prefer to think of us as headquartered in a video conference room somewhere, because quite a lot of our leadership is actually based in Australia. And we're pretty evenly split in terms of revenues and in terms of number of people employed between the two countries. If you look at the landscape of service providers, and IDC do a pretty good job of measuring that, Trans-Tasman by scale, we're in the top 10. And every other one is either a global company or a telco.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. So, I mean, you're competing with the IBMs of the world, aren't you?
Yep. Well, remember, IBM split more recently, and so Kyndryl's services are now. But yet we go head-to-head with them and DXC and Accenture and other organisations like that. But headquartered in this part of the world, able to front up and talk to any of the customers as senior as they want, and very invested in the future of both countries too.
Okay, so what's your competitive advantage? Why Datacom vis-a-vis Accenture, for example, which has made big strides in the technology space really over the last decade or so? What is it that you're bringing to the table that the others aren't?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? So rather than play it versus a single one of them, I think I should talk about what I consider to be our strengths. One is, I think the fact that we're privately held has enabled us to invest in things for a genuinely long horizon. And so we've been able to build capability and invest. So a couple of the things we do, we've invested over a very long horizon in some SaaS products aimed at both the payroll market and the local government market, because we felt that they were being hugely underserved in this part of the world by global organizations. Some of the customer relationships we've built have lasted decades. And they've lasted decades because we pride ourselves on trying to be easy to do business with. And so as the customers have come to us and said, actually, we need something different now, you kind of do your best to rip up the old contract and say, where do you want to go now? And work with them for the long term. And much of that played out during the pandemic too, where we had to provide a tremendous amount of assistance to some of our customers who'd been more impacted by it, and really just kind of look at those relationships over a long horizon, not a short-term one. I guess in terms of a difference, if you consider that in some places where you work over a long horizon to build intellectual property, you can differentiate on that. But a lot of it is in what do you like to do business with? Where do you hire your people? What quality of people do you have who work for you? And service providers ultimately operate in we're providing our people to assist your people in making your technology strategy move forward. And so the quality of the people that you're able to field to help customers solve their problems is probably the biggest difference. That and your willingness to work with them in a reasonable way.
Stay with me, Greg. We'll be back in a minute. My guest today is Greg Davidson, CEO of Datacom. So I'm just trying to get my head around a company that would use you. It may do anything from outsourcing and that type of thing, cloud migration, all those sorts of products?
Yeah, very broad. So we've got somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 who work in application development, right the way across the spectrum of .NET development, Java development, Salesforce Dynamics, business intelligence, with artificial intelligence applied to it, outsourcing, cloud migration, cybersecurity. I could keep going, right? If I sit here and catalog it, I'll be going for a while.
Yeah. No, what I'm interested in is whether or not, I mean, are most of your solutions bespoke? So what I find interesting, having worked in big organizations, is that when you get people in to help you, sometimes you end up with off-the-shelf products. Other times you end up with products that you can never upgrade because they have become so modified. So is most of now, in 2022, is most of this bespoke work? Is it stuff that you've developed from off-the-shelf products that you're selling? How's it work?
So those examples I gave in the payroll space and the local government space are where we have built products, software as a service products for organisations in this part of the world. And if I give the payroll example, so 30,000 businesses pay their employees via the payroll product that we've built. So it really is a product in the truest sense of it. Where we've got application developers working on behalf of our customers, whereas even 5 years or so ago, quite a lot of it would have been more in the examples I gave, like .NET or Java, the platforms have really continued to rise. So you'll see a tremendous amount more work happen on a platform like Salesforce or Dynamics. So Pega, I could give, there are other examples I could give. And so that is, your example of how people have customized solutions to the point where they can't take upgrades relates to the earlier generation of kind of customer installed systems.
Yep.
And these modern platforms, if you don't think about it carefully, can come with their own lock-in, but they're designed to be continuously upgraded over time. And where you are going to use a package, the best advice in and around that is use it for what it was intended for, and don't attempt to use it for the things it wasn't designed for.
So in a sense, a modern platform, Salesforce was an example you gave, in a sense, they're doing a lot more than they ever used to do.
All of those platforms are continuing to broaden out, very much.
Yeah.
And they're all starting to overlap each other. So most of them grew up in a niche. Salesforce grew up in CRM, but has broadened massively. Workday grew up in human capital management, but has broadened massively. And I could give Pega different again. And so what you're seeing is all of those platforms just broaden out and broaden out.
Do we get to a point where there's, a few dozen major platforms doing most of this stuff, or no?
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? And it's one where I think lots of large organizations have to make a judgment call. Do they want to buy 4 or 5 platforms and spend a lot of money integrating them? Or are they willing to use some of them in areas where they're perhaps not as strong as others, but they don't have to pay for the integration of them? And I can see customers juggling with that decision a lot, far more so than I think they were even 5 years ago.
Okay, a couple of just moving on a little bit. COVID. So how did that change your world and the world of how big business use people like you, vis-a-vis the products they're providing to their customers?
The early days of COVID for us, there was a lot of work that was really simply helping customers who are perhaps a little less prepared for work from anywhere get themselves back up and running again, and ensuring that they could do what they needed to do. And across our customer base, we had the total spectrum from work that we were doing for airports and airlines, where their revenues went to a small fraction of what they were before, and we really needed to turn down services to help them economically, right the way through to doing work for postal and delivery organisations and supermarket chains, where their volumes were at 4 times their normal, and all they wanted to do was keep their system stable through a busy period. If you roll forward, let's say 9 months after the initial lockdowns, what you saw is every organisation that had a digital strategy was finding that their adoption levels were running at 3 to 5 years ahead of where they predicted they would be. And what they were wanting to do was keep that increased adoption and the use of their digital offerings. And so they were investing more in it. Now, all the other organizations that didn't have an effective enough way of dealing with their customers or partners or employees digitally realized that they needed to up their investment in it if they managed to survive the pandemic. And so what you've seen is, I think, the biggest upturn in investment in digital that I've seen in my career. And the same thing is true. The pandemic also increased the amount of need for cybersecurity protection, and some of the other global events have also kind of spotlighted the importance of technology in the last while. And so what you're seeing is the biggest push for more skills in this space that I can remember in my entire career working in the industry. And you would have seen that reported right the way all over the place. It's also accentuated by work from anywhere, meaning that people who are working in the industry have a greater ability, if they're willing to work the time zone, to choose where in the world they work, even if they're still based in New Zealand or Australia. So some of our best talent is now doing work into other countries as well.
Greg, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
No problem. Thanks, Sean.
That was Greg Davidson, CEO of Datacom Group. This is a Fear and Greed daily interview. Remember, you should get professional advice before making any investment decisions. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.